Well, the karting season for this year starts in a few weeks' time, and a friend of mine's off to Spa to have a run around the track, but he's got a bit of an issue with these dinky little spark plugs that he uses. I think it's only a one-cylinder, two-stroke engine kind of affair, but basically there's a high-tension cap that goes over the spark plug, and then there's a little plastic housing which just clips on to stop this thing coming off in the rough and tumble world of motorsports. And apparently you can't get these, so he's had this one 3D printed, and it's not terrible quality, but how it's going to fare in the high stress world of a proper race, I don't know. So anyway, he's asked for a few dozen of these to be made, and it's a slightly complicated thing to put together because obviously we've got plastic surrounding it on pretty much all sides apart from this one. So moulding this in any conventional manner, you're just not going to be able to get it out of the mould without bouncing it up and off, because this is probably going to have to be made in nylon. Nylon is quite brittle when you mould it. You have to dry all the moisture out of it first, which tends to make it snap as soon as you put any significant pressure on the thing. So I could probably cheat and get away with doing it in a stiff polyurethane, but I've still got to actually bump this up over a slug that's in here with this little geometry with a couple of wings on it. So instead of doing that, I've been having a think. If I zoom out slightly, this is essentially what I've come up with. The idea is to have 4 plates and a core in the middle. So if this is going to show up on camera, essentially I've got a fairly small base plate here which will take the kind of horseshoe collar part of the mould. So this is just going to be a piece of 6mm plate which I'm going to drill the usual bolt holes and everything in, pocket this out with a 3mm cutter, put a few vents on it, and then there'll be a top plate which will have that side on it, but this is actually going to be flush. I'm thinking I'm going to engrave a little lightning bolt on the thing because it is a high tension lead, so I'll add that to that. But this is 34 millimeters in length, so I'm thinking if I actually cut this section into the center of the mold and leave this section flush, and then this section here which is 2 millimeters deep, that will go on this base plate that I've got, and then in between the two from here to here I need 32 millimeters, and it just so happens that I have some plate which is 16 millimeters. Now I could go and order some 32 in, but I haven't actually got any cutters that are quite deep enough to go through here. Well, I have, but they're quite large. So by doing it in 2 stages I can cut what I need out of this and then basically bolt it together. So the idea is to have this plate here, and we will cut a couple of these little pink slugs that will live inside, and then a couple of keyhole slots which these will engage in, and these need to cut these first to make sure that they do fit into this slot nice and snug. And the basic idea is my actual cap is going to sit here, so this part of the slug at the back is basically going to be keyed in to this surround plate that I'm making, which will be a double thickness of this. So pocket this out two times, bolt them together, and that creates the center surround for this thing. And then these, which need to be cut to perfectly match, they should just drop in, and obviously a couple of holes in them just to key them into place. So I'll have some little guide pins sticking up from the base to put them together. And then the only other thing I need to do is on these cores that drop in, is I just need to take this down 2 millimeters to create this cap here. So I don't actually need anything on my top surface plate, it just needs to seal it, but because I've got that anyway, I think I'm just going to add a little bit of engraving, and then there'll be a small feed point which will actually come in round about here. So my gate venting will be out of these 2 ends here, which should be the end of the fill, and I think I can make the top and bottom plates out of a piece of 6mm aluminium, and I'm pretty sure I can make all of this out of a single piece of 16, which then just needs to be bolted together to make it 32. So I'll crack on with that, and we'll start to put it together and see if we can get something that looks like this and actually get it out of the mould. I think I should be able to, because when I lift the lid and take this plug out, all of that should come with it, and then I just have to slide the plug out here, and that should free it. So yeah, quite a bit of machining to do on that, but it's not terribly complicated. It's just going round and round in circles. Okay, I've prepped the plate, drilled the usual complement of holes, and now we're going to have a quick go at cutting out this collar here. and on this one it's 2mm thick, and that's obviously got a clip in on the spark plug. So I'm doing this in such a way that I can come down a little bit further on here if it's not a very tight fit. But we'll start by just pocketing this out 1/2 mil deep, 4 times over with a 3mm slot drill. With a bit of luck that'll fit first time, but if not I can always put the plate back on and just extend that slightly if necessary. So let's give that a spin. Well, that took about 5 minutes in real time, so another 15 and that'll all be cut out. And yeah, it looks like it just drops in, so that's probably a good enough fit. There's a bit of a burr on the edge, but I think we can soon clear that up. No big deal, but that will go. So yeah, looking okay. Right, 3 more spins and we'll move on to a little bit of engraving. Right, I've just done a finishing pass on that because I was getting a little tiny bump here, and I think that was simply because I was cutting a little bit quickly, and so you tend to get a bit of pressure on the bit and it doesn't always cut exactly true to where you want it. So by running a little bit slower on that last pass, it's just cleared the edges up, and that looks pretty reasonable. So if that drops in, yeah, just fairly tight fit, but I think that'll probably do. So now I'm just going to do a little bit of engraving in here. It's not absolutely essential, but I thought it'd be a nice touch. And I've tried various things for engraving. A friend of mine uses spot drills like this, but they tend to have a little bit of a chisel tip on the end. This is an alternative spot drill. Again, the tip, although it looks like it goes to a point, it's actually slightly flattened across on this side, so you don't get a particularly sharp cut using those. I have tried really fine point dental burrs in the past, and these really do go down to a fine point, but unfortunately they're so brittle, especially at the neck, so weak that they tend to either wobble around or they tend to snap off. I've tried proper engraving bits. This is one I got which does seem to go up to a fairly good point, but again it's a little bit wider on this angle than it is on this, so that sort of works but is not brilliant. So my preferred method of engraving is basically to use a 1mm ball nose. These obviously being a rounded end don't give you a perfectly sharp point at the very tip, but nevertheless if you go about 100-150 microns deep you get a reasonably good clean engraving on the thing. So we'll put this in, line it all up, and then I'll have to go a bit slow on this one, so it's going to take a little while, but I think we'll get away with it. So I'll reference that up and then just come in here and put made in England around the edge, since they're going off to Germany. I thought we may as well show off. And we're done. That took slightly less than an hour. And because I have to use a bit of cutting fluid, I've not actually seen what this looks like. But it doesn't look too bad. A little bit blurry, but that might be okay. So all I've got to do now is add a couple of small vents here and here, put some reference marks on in case I need to come back and do this again, and then we can shuffle this plate along and do the other half. Right, this is the second plate. I've already drilled out the magnet holes and the little bolt holes. Now I just need to punch a 1mm diameter hole through here for the gate. That only needs to go 2 or 3 millimeters deep, and then we'll just engrave a little lightning bolt over here, about 0.5 millimetre deep I think we'll probably do. I can always open that up a little bit if it doesn't look terribly good, but we'll see what happens. Obviously this is going to be mirrored so that when we get the moulding out it'll be the right way round. But once I've done this, I've just got to then drill all the holes out, turn it over, re-reference this plate, and then put a little bit of a feed on the back of this. So not a lot more to do, but we'll start with the drilling. Yeah, that looks like a lightning bolt to me. Cool. And after a spot of drilling, sawing and tapping, these are the top and bottom plates. So this is going to bolt into the moulding machine. These guide pins, these two will align the centre core section, which will basically fill in the void here. So there'll be a block in here, and the idea is when we take the mould apart that will slide out, and then that's simply the top plate which will come on top. And I've drilled in from the back to put a little feed there. Haven't added the guide pins to this yet, but so far it's looking okay. So the next stage will be to cut this central slug out, because I need to cut that first so that when I cut the surround I can drop this in and just make sure it's a good fit, because it's easier to adjust the surround plate than it will be to adjust this if I need to make any minor changes. So far so good. Now we'll prep that thicker plate, drill a load of holes and start pocketing out the cores. Well, I've made a start on the core plates, although this probably looks like far side of the moon. All of these holes do actually have a purpose. There's going to be one core block here and the other half here, and basically this one will bolt on top of this one. So these are the bolt holes where I'm screwing in from the top, and then these two here will need tapping. This central hole will come in from the bottom to help bind it together as well, so I need to flip this over and re-drill that. And then these at the end are actually for a dummy mould, because I have a 2-feed hot runner on the mould base that I use, so I have to prepare 2 moulds the same height when I'm working with these smaller moulds. So that's going to be sitting underneath, if I get this right, underneath that one, and then that part there is going to bolt on top, and then that part will bolt on top of that, and that will block everything up to the same height as the main mould. So not too critical that, it's just a consequence of the system I use. So basically I now need to come in with an end mill. I did think of drilling around these to take a lot of the material out, but then I'm just going to get an intermittent cut, so I'm not sure it's going to make a great deal of difference. So I'm just going to come in from the edge and pocket these out slowly, and I need to do that in such a way that I can clamp here when it comes out. So I'll probably end up cutting this side first, clamp here, and then cut this side, and then that frees out, and then repeat over here, and we'll have our 2 core slugs. Well, that just moved, so that suggests that that's actually free. Well, there's a little bit of a burr on that edge, but that'll come off. So yeah, that's nothing major. Otherwise, there's our next piece of the puzzle. It's a little bit rough around this edge, but that's going to be on the inside. I was being quite aggressive with the cuts, but yeah, tidy all that up, that'll be fine. So we'll just do this one now. Okay, I've got a slightly different approach this time. I'm going to come in and take this back edge off while I've got 4 clamps holding everything down, and then hopefully I can come in from this side and take the front edge off as well, and then it's a case of probably cropping it here, move these clamps around, and then get a clamp on from this side so that I can take this final pass off, and if there is a breakout issue then it's going to be along this edge, which won't be too difficult to tidy up. So we'll see if that works any better. Now before I go all the way through this, I just need to pocket a section out here to form the cap, so I'm going to do that before we get too deep. Right, final stage is just taking this wall out here, so I'm clamping it as best I can, but I don't think we'll have a problem until we get quite deep, so I might just slow down for the last few passes, but if I do get a breakout it's only going to be along that edge, so nothing too much to worry about. Right, and that has gone through. So I should be able to remove this off a section. There we go. And yeah, it's a little bit rough along this edge. Okay, might need to do something with that, but that's going to be on the inside anyway. I have been flogging this quite hard, but I think we'll get away with it. It's this end that I'm more worried about. So all of this crap here, I think I can just file that slightly, but it shouldn't matter. I'll probably check the backlash before I do the next stage anyway, which I'm going to chop out of this remaining section here, but I'm just going to buzz down this edge and tidy it up before removing it. So yeah, okay, most of it done. Right, well I've put them together and they don't look too bad. There is a bit of a bump along this edge here, which I think is basically because I've been travelling a bit too quick when I'm cutting it. Depending on where the cut is, this looks like it's a backlash compensation as it comes around this corner, and obviously the bit is pushing against the workpiece, and so any play in the table is not going to be fully compensated. So it's a bit of a trade-off really between the accuracy and the speed of the cut. There's also a bit of a nibble out of here, but that was deliberate because the plate was only just wide enough to get two of these on, so I had to compromise slightly and just overlap there, but this is going to be at the back, so I'm not too concerned. But apart from that, it all comes together quite nicely. I'm not sure adding these little ridges down the side is going to be highly beneficial. It may just make it tricky to get the thing out, but we'll see. So perhaps, but I couldn't add these later very easily anyway, so we'll see what happens. But main thing is it does fit on there quite nice, so that's good. It won't fit on here terribly well because I've designed this with a bit of mould shrinkage allowance, so but it's not far off, so it's looking good so far. Now I've just got to pocket out those other two plates and put the jigsaw together and see if it looks like it's going to run. It's a little difficult to see from this angle because it's quite small, the clamps are in the way, but basically our 8mm end mill is going to drop in that hole, so we're not trying to cut on the end of it, which won't work very well. So all I've got to do now is come in here and pocket around and around to create the space for this to drop in. So I've cut this first, so I can now cut this so that this is a press fit. I don't want it too tight, but I want it tight enough not to wiggle around or flash down the sides. So I'm actually going to come in slightly smaller than it needs to be and then do a finishing pass and just open it up, so it'll be a full length cut at the end, all the way through, and just taking off maybe 1/4 millimetre as we go around 2 or 3 times, just so that drops in nice and tight. And then when we've done that, just repeat on the other side and we have all the pieces to the puzzle. That didn't take too long, so we've got the centre out, and now if I just come around this edge a few times, slowly working my way out until we get a good fit. That should currently be about 22mm across there, and I'm getting, if I can get a grip on that, at 21.9, so yep, not far off. So a few more passes and hopefully that will drop in. Right, let's see if this fits. Ooh, it's not very far off. Oops, try it that way up. It's close. A little bit more. I think I'm going to call that done because that just slides in, which is good. It's a little bit tight to get out, but I can always just sand the edges of here just to give it a bit more clearance, and this way round fits really well, so I don't think we'll have too much trouble with that now. So yeah, that's looking good. All I've got to do now is just cut a couple of slots on either side for when I crack the mould open, and then we'll move on, index this along and do the same on this side. Well, that's the surround plate finished and bolted together, and I've given it, apart from sticking some magnets in, it's about done. So if I get this the right way up, that goes on there, and that should just slide down there like that. It's a pretty tight fit, but once this clamps under 40 tons of pressure, I don't think that'll be a problem. And then the lid just goes on like that. So it's a bit rough around the edges. I could always go and machine all of that out if necessary, but apart from a few tweaks here and there, I think this will probably work. I think it might just need a little bit of adjustment on some of these holes, maybe just re-drill those out, but it's pretty much coming apart, which is good, and then that, with a bit of luck, one way or the other, that way, will slide out. So that's sitting pretty reasonably. There's a bit of a gap at this edge, which I actually designed in because I didn't want it to bite basically under the pressure, because if it's going to move, it's going to move back this way and it could jam. So hopefully that will give us some of those. But right, I'll finish that off, put some magnets in, get some plastic warmed up, probably nylon, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, I've mounted the mould to the faceplate that I use, the mounting plate, so this just literally screws over an existing mould to act as the mould base. So that's the mould itself with the all-important surround, which goes on that way. The core plate I've split into two because I figured it's going to slide out a little easier if I do it in two parts. So they will live in there, and then the lid will come on like so. And there's our feed point here, and then this monstrosity at this end is just a bundle of plates that happen to be the same height as this, because on my machine I've got two feed points coming off a hot runner, and obviously I can't just have a mould here because the mould's going to twist as it tries to close, so I need a counter plate down at this end. So anyway, that's it bolted on. I'm now going to fit this to the machine and we'll see if we can squirt a bit of plastic in and get any good results. Right, well, it's taken a bit of effort to get these things running, but they are actually starting to mould. So that should just squeeze out like that. That's slicing my fingers on the razor sharp edges, and then with a bit of luck that should just wiggle out like that, and then that one comes out like that, and we have our cap. And most importantly, they fit. In fact, they fit slightly better than the 3D printed one. So I don't know how many of these I'm going to end up doing, but I'm just going to keep going until I run out of material, and we'll assess the damage and the blood after that. Well, I got a few of them off before I ran out of material. That's the original 3D printed one, which is a little bit loose, and these are the nylon ones, which are still a little bit stiff because they haven't picked up any moisture yet, but that clicks on quite nicely, and that's a good tight snug fit. Needs a little bit of a gate removal process there, and there's a little tiny flash down the edges, but not awful. I think they'll do for what they need to do. I did get some at the end which started flashing badly down the edges, and that caused a bit of a problem trying to get them out, so I might have another look at the design of this and just see if I can improve on that slightly. But yeah, it seems to work, so I'll try and make a few more of those and pass them on to our local Fangio and see what he thinks of them.